We've had our members who have run their canteens during this period and sent meals regularly for people around their area. We've had our uh, procurement team. We set up a special team which is helping some people design ventilators, not only design but develop ventilators which could come in handy as the time passes. And we have had uh, our own contribution to the PPE equipment, which we've handed over at certain places over the country. So, sir, this is a little bit whatever we all, as members of our council, we have been able to do till now. It's a very small step, but still, I thought it's worth mentioning. Coming to today's subject of infrastructure, the key growth engine and the way forward, uh, I can say very clearly that infrastructure is one of the main activities, which is the backbone for the country and which has been always carrying us forward. And if we have to make progress, if we have to grow to be a superpower where we are headed, infrastructure is one of the main things that we have to work upon. And therefore, we just requested a very eminent panel connected with this subject to be with us today. And we'll surely listen to their viewpoints as we go along. I would only take a little bit to go through the background of what is the infrastructure investment and plans in India, as well as our construction equipment industry, what way we are looking at it, and how we are handling the current situation. And me and the other panelists from our industry would go deeper into it. But I would start by giving some background. As we know that the Prime Minister has announced our target to be a 5 trillion economy, which would take us to maybe nearly double the size of now, less than double, but a major growth. But one of the connected factors is that to reach that figure of 5 trillion, by the time at 2030, we should be spending about US dollar 4.5 trillion on infrastructure only. So that is the kind of a focus on infrastructure development. Also, uh, we are now spending something like 6% of our GDP on infrastructure. This has come down slightly from the figures which used to be 7% up to 2012, but that is largely because economy has grown faster. So percentage of infra has come down, although we've had slowing downs in between, we've had different speeds, which I'll share with you. And the other factor which is worth looking at is that the Prime Minister announced a spending of 100 lakh crore rupees, which is equal to US dollar 1.41 trillion in the next 5 years on infrastructure. So that is the kind of potential on which we are sitting. That is the kind of possibility we as an industry are looking forward to, and which always gives us hope that we would be very much in the forefront of development of this country. However, uh, as in the past we have seen our ups and downs very much as an industry. Uh, we had a period where, in the period of 2012 to 2014, let's say after the 2008 global crash, we had a slightly negative time. But from 2012 to 14, we again continued being negative. This continued a lot because infra projects were not getting their due attention. And during that period, we had a minus 12% growth as an industry. Then from 15 to 19, we saw a huge push on road construction thanks to Pandey Saab's NHAI. And we saw a lot of irrigation and mining projects taking speed. And we saw a plus 19% traction during that period as an industry. Unfortunately, last year, which is the year ended now in March, we have seen a minus 23% degrowth, which one is that March was a wipeout due to the effect of COVID-19. But also in September 2018, we saw a little bit of financial crunch, especially coming from NBFCs because of some happenings which put the funding and flow of cash into them a little slow. And our industry is highly dependent on financing, and NBFCs play a big role. So that is where this industry has its sensitivity. Uh, then came this time of the COVID, and since March, effectively for us, lockdown has been from 25th of March in India, but some of us could see things slowing down tremendously throughout the March. We also saw that some companies had started closing down from middle of March. And as an industry, we saw things coming to quite a stoppage because uh, some things that we are really proud to be saying as an industry, that during those times in the past, which I shared with you, the ups and downs, we didn't lose our focus on investment. We didn't lose our focus on R&D, engineering developments. And today I can say as an industry, we match with the status of our co-partners or our principals all over the world. India, the machines that we introduce now for the projects are as advanced and of the technology that we are using the world over. So we are always in step with the government, whether it is for bringing out the BS specification machines now, which are to roll out this year. And we are always there when the country needs us for for the support. And definitely with this kind of spending plans, we were all in top gear with the capacity, but now we see a very, very uncertain time in front of us. And we therefore thought that it would be a very, very opportune time to have the views from our side as well as from eminent speakers whom we have invited to be here. And what we are looking at right now, sirs, is that as I mentioned, manufacturing plants have been closed down. Some of us have now started working, but very, very skeleton staff. It's more of getting a stopped engine to again restart. That will take its own time. We have a situation where all our customers, the projects, except for some mining, which continued because mines are located on the outskirts and most of the workers there stay within the premises or nearby, and they therefore can operate meeting the norms. So the mining continued, but we saw all projects, whether it was for road construction, urban infra, metros, everything came to a stop. And we saw that also as these things were approaching, coincidentally just before that, we saw a financial inflow kind of freezing up for our finances, mainly the NBFCs, and also for some banks. And we were trying to operate in that pre-COVID period just before the lockdown by trying to see how to get financing, how to get the projects going with our machine supply to contractors. And I'll have some of these points elaborated more by Mr. Subir Chaudhary and later by Mr. Vyas. Also, sirs, we have a lot of our suppliers as MSMEs, and they are also in severe trouble because they have, like us, a lot of workforce to look after. And I must mention that at this time, we as an industry, being at about $5.8 billion turnover, we are responsible for direct and indirect employment of about 3 million people as on the projects that are handled through our machines. So we look at that as a big responsibility, and we see that some of our contractors who have tried to restart projects are finding getting the labor back as a big issue. And also there is a supply disruption due to imports. Ports are operating just at about 20% capacity. We have what I mentioned about our vendors' problems. So in this situation, like I said, in the past, whenever we had a slowdown, we knew the reasons, we knew the solutions, we knew somewhat the timing of when we'll be able to get over it. But today, it's something that all of us are just not able to envisage. And our concerns are that are we heading for a cash crunch in terms of the projects going forward? Also, since it's a pandemic which has affected in a big way, are the government priorities going to change? Will healthcare obviously will take a lot of government attention and funds, Will our projects get diverted as far as funds are concerned? Our prime movers like the road construction and Pandey Saab's department, uh, will they will now maybe need to rethink of different ways of project financing and trying to do alternate ways of working of projects, and we'll listen to him more on this. And surely NBFCs will need some different solutions for
now it's there.
being
Wait,
able to
just
finance.
Just a minute.
Okay, Mr. I think the Honorable Minister is joining. I'll just give a break for him here.
Sir, Honorable.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Sarmaji, you may continue. I think Minister Saab will join.
All right. So I have finished more or less, and this being the current situation, we thought this is a very, very correct time for us to discuss with all of you and get your views on some of these issues. But before I come to our invited guests from outside, I'd like to go to my colleague, Mr. Subir Chaudhary, the MD of JCB India. Subir, I'd like you to kindly give us more inputs and focus on that. You would have now started your operations again. So what are the kind of issues you have to grapple with? I'll take a minute to welcome Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat ji. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. You are one of the very busy people these days, sir, and we are passing through that kind of a critical time. So just for your benefit, I'll just take you very briefly through that the construction equipment industry today, which is the size of about $6 billion, and which we are the prime movers and I think the backbone for infra growth in India. We have been directly and indirectly responsible for employment of about 3 million people on the projects in the country now. So while we have seen such ups and downs in the past, sir, we knew the reasons very well when those slowdowns happened, whether it was due to land acquisitions, due to project financing, etc. And we could therefore see some solutions and the time period by which we'll be able to come out of it. But today is a time, sir, when we are all seeing such a situation for the first time in our life. And with the uncertainty, we do not know how projects will take shape, how government financing and priorities will happen, and how do we take care of the connected people with us. And therefore, we thought of holding this seminar, sir, and to take the views from eminent people like yourselves, Mr. Pandey and Mr. Mundra. But before that, sir, I thought I'll invite my colleague from JCB India, Mr. Subir Chaudhary, to take you a little more into depth of what the industry is grappling with right now, before I come to you, sir. So I was asking Subir that, you have started your operations, and if you could share with us what are the major issues you had to grapple with in the restart. How do you look at taking it forward now by trying to match all the problems of supply chain, etc. And is financing of equipment and projects something which worries you? So what are the problems you foresee all around these, as well as your supply chain, domestic and international? So over to you, Subir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Honorable Minister, sir. Good afternoon and good afternoon to everyone. At the onset, let me start by acknowledging the decisive action taken by Government of India on fighting COVID-19. And very proud moment when Dr. Amartya Sen says that PM Modi was ahead of other leaders in seeing the problems. So it really gives that level of strong message to the way the country is under strong leadership. We are also in a better position as we have seen than many nations with much stronger healthcare system. But as you rightly said, that as we are exiting from the lockdown, it becomes an absolute collective responsibility for every citizen to ensure that we do not lose these gains and we hold on this and really take it forward. So it's a social responsibility to build a stronger country and build a society. So coming back to on your specific point, sir, I just try to talk about that. We have restarted operation across all the three sites, Faridabad, Pune, and Jaipur, in different shapes and sizes. We are running a very lean organization as of now in terms of the number of people. And our biggest focus today is that the stringent compliance to the COVID-19 guidelines. We can't miss that. We can't have a misstep onto that guidelines because it is going to get the society into a real bad state. So it's critical to understand that new realities and challenges across the manufacturing sectors and across every sector. But first and foremost, sir, as I said, that we are working on creating a very robust health and safety around a protocol across our employees, dealers, suppliers, and across the entire value chain. Also, the focus on restart is become that we will go in a very calibrated manner and very step by step so that we don't expose the entire teams into a next level of challenges. But with all those things, I think there are some transient challenges which we face on the ground today. And they're largely on the coordination with the local administrations and mainly on the supplier side I'm talking about, which are the tier 1 suppliers, tier 2 suppliers. But I believe they will be all solved in next couple of days' time. But most critical, I think where I like to bring in is that the difficulties on our suppliers to reopen their areas, their operations, and also many of the dealership networks are also not able to start up. There are two issues. One, of course, as you very rightly alluded to, is getting the manpower back into the system, into the stream. And second is that they are severely cash strapped. Many of them are significantly cash strapped in terms of starting their operations. Zero revenues over the last 45, 50 days. And then, in terms of expenditures which they are. So we are all need to really understand how we crank up the most vulnerable part of that supply chain and the dealers. So, but I'm very confident that with the new normal of many of us will be working from home, may not be the direct manufacturing folks, but many of them outside the manufacturing area. So that's going to be a new normal for us. I just like to also touch upon one more aspect, sir, and since Honorable Minister is here, that this shutdown has created a sudden demand shrunk. The entire demand was absolutely overnight. It got a demand side shock. So which resulted, whatever we are seeing is the zero revenue warning, a massive level of economic disruption, and across the world, it is not India. But where we believe as an industry, construction equipment industry, and as a citizen of India, that, in our case, the best way to believe the start of the whole cycle, economic cycle, is possible probably through first an acceleration on the mega investment on the infrastructure. And why infrastructure? Why I'm talking about infrastructure? Because, sir, infrastructure has a multiplier effect. It has a significant impact on many areas. To start with, I'll talk about that it brings back millions of construction workers, millions of migrant workers, millions of daily wage earners who are gone out of the economic cycle back into the whole level of economy. And I think that's where it can spark the whole demand growth, giving money to them through some level of productive work. And I think that is going to be a significant level of opportunity for us to kickstart this industry. Second, it also has very important cascading effect of kickstarting many allied sectors like steel, cement, mining, crushing, logistics. So, the whole cascading effect of infra push is going to be significant, and it can be coming back in a shorter cycle. It may not require 6-8 months. So that's the clear level of winning proposition we can work through. And the third is that when we are looking at, the country is looking at a fiscal deficit of certainly breaching the norm, at we have to go beyond 3.5%, we all know, and investing into the productive asset, which is significantly grow India's stature in terms of developing infrastructure and improving the logistics, improving the efficiency as we take on the post-COVID-19. So I think it's overall a great package to really get the reverberate the whole economy in a quick, maybe 6 to 8 months time. The second part where I think is very extremely important as the road sector, and where our minister, Mr. Gadkari, talked about that post-COVID-19 is a great opportunity. So we have got 59 lakh crore sort of projects under today, in terms of development and implementation stage. Now, if you can push the whole capital infusion into those projects and identify few as the core mover, I think that itself will be a huge level of benefit to the industry going forward. The other sector, sir, I just thought to, really, we are very encouraged you are here today. And as Honorable Minister, you mentioned some time back, probably a year back, that it's a great mission to reach the entire drinking water to 14 crore household. And connecting the 14 crore household with the drinking water by 2024 is a huge opportunity which we can always get into a implementation phase under your blessings. So I think there are lots of opportunities which you can really move across when we see the infrastructure space. The third element, I think, which is very critical is the rural element, rural village roads, village water body reclamation, the water body restoration, and then local small irrigation projects. So this can really engage our rural folks into the economic cycle and kickstart the economic activities of the rural area. So overall, I really believe, Vikram, that infrastructure is going to be the key driver to the economy. And that's going to be really pushing the whole growth curve ahead of us. Now, moving to the third element, which you talked about.
Sorry, Subir, I have to just come back to you after a few minutes. I believe our Honorable Minister, sir, is to leave after some time.
Okay.
Please, just very sorry, just hold
Sure,
there.
sure. No, sir, absolutely.
Sir, I'll just very briefly take time to introduce her. As we have been introduced.
I still have 15-20 minutes with me.
Oh, all
so
right, sir.
It would be better for me if I can listen all of you so that it is going to enlighten me.
Okay, sir. I got a very different message, so I have to intervene.
Because our message is the Prime Minister or all of us. It is always available with everybody. All of you, you might be watching everybody on all various platforms. But I think I consider this and I've joined this as an opportunity to listen to the industry, how you people are thinking, what solution. See, I know the problems, as Mr. Shibir Chaudhary was telling about the problems. I understand, and everybody, almost everybody, a little less or more, everybody understands the problem and they are seeing the problems. We understand that the problems are going to create deep impacts on everything, everybody's life. As you were talking about that revenue is shrinking for the company. So simultaneously, it is making cascading effects to the government's revenue also, because everything is interconnected. So what suggestions you are looking for, or what policy changes you are looking for? See, you people, the people you am right now talking to, you understand the economics very well. You understand the country's economics very well. You understand the steps already have been initiated and taken by the government very well. So I would like to hear from all of you that what exactly the solutions, how we can revive our economy, understanding the Indian situation and the government's financial condition, how we can revive, how we can convert this pandemic and the situation created because of this pandemic as an opportunity for country. That as people are talking that the migration, there is no doubt, undoubtedly, we'll have to accept that there is a huge sense of dissatisfaction or displeasure is there with our neighbor. I should not name out, but how we can use, utilize that as an opportunity for us. So I would like to hear from all of you. And that would going to give me more insight, and I would be able to communicate to the people, and because since I am part of that economy revival group, so I will be able to put across the ideas and your concepts and your requirements and your insight across the table. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Sorry, Subir, please continue. Your mic is on mute here.
Thank you. You can hear me? Oh, yes. No. Yeah, thank you. So, sir, very rightly said. So I think that one area where, we'll all look forward is that, probably identifying few of the core projects where, be it on the rural, be it on the infrastructure, be it on the irrigation. And now the latest one, which you all believe is, everybody's attention is on the healthcare, which is the whole pink revolution. So if you can really get, a little bit more about some of the core priority projects. So that's going to be one area. Second, sir, as you rightly said, the entire supply chain is going to go through a major level of disruption. Now, on the supply chain side, we all understand the problem. Now, if we can really look at, like we as JCB, I'm sure everybody is like to working on really getting the whole supply chain out of one dimension of, lowest cost international sourcing. We all understand what we are saying, into the localization into the country. And if you can also understand, sir, that some of the support on few core areas where manufacturing capability, investing into manufacturing, like, let me talk about that some of in our industry, where we are sure that if we can get some of the international suppliers out into India and very focused manner, which we are all independent today. So very, again, a priority level of work around manufacturing side, manufacturing supply chain side, so that we can crank them up and bring it into the country so that we can de-risk us from the international supply chain side. But sir, one help, sir, where we certainly require, which Mr. Sharma talked about, is the MSMEs, really getting the fund into MSME. I think that's where we are all going to struggle, because this 6 weeks is not going to be 6 weeks impact. It may be 6 months impact, or for many, the impact will be larger. So somehow pushing the MSME support system will be a big level of support, which we all be looking at. On the last one, Vikram, you talked about on the financing challenges. There are critical challenge which we are looking at, the whole level of liquidity transmission. Now we have seen RBI has done driven many initiatives, but those initiatives from RBI is not getting pushed back into the system to the NBFCs. And as you rightly says, NBFCs have been already in a turbulence with the level of ILFS situation. But now today, more than any time, we require the whole NBFCs to become more viable, and the whole liquidity move, the whole transmission of liquidity to move into from the banks. So that's a very, very core challenge we are facing. Sir, we have the people who are ready to buy machines for their livelihood, but they are not able to get the funding because of the liquidity transmission is not happening. And that's probably one area, if we can, get your support through the entire level of your own government support, bank support, which has come through already through the RBI. That's going to be a big, big level of winning proposition to kickstart the entire liquidity cycle. Because unless you can push the cash cycle with the customers or with the contractors, I know it'll be very, very difficult to push the whole economic growth cycle back into the motion. So really speaking, that these are the core challenges we are facing on the ground. And I'm sure that with the tremendous strong government in place at the center, we will see some sort of a major changes. But the good news is that, of course, we have seen very positive, agriculture growth. It's a record agriculture output, which as we have seen. We are also expecting a good normal monsoon this year. And in addition to that, with the domestic market, which the domestic consumption driven economy which India has, there's a tremendous amount of positivity around the country's potential. And we all believe that as we all strongly have faith that we will come much stronger as a nation after post-COVID-19. And then together we will be a winner as a nation.
Thanks very much, Subir. And before I call Mr. Vyas for some views on your questions, because you made this forum much more interesting by putting the onus on us to be giving suggestions. It's a wonderful way, sir. I'll just like to add one thing before I ask Mr. Vyas to give his comments on suggestions on finance. Sir, we have in my memory at least 2 times in the past seen when India was at the cusp of getting a lot of foreign investment into India in terms of long-term investments by getting people to move and set base in India. Today is a great opportunity, 3rd time. So what we would request, sir, is that while we would be talking to various technology partners and people who are operating in our neighboring country and who want to move out, we'll be certainly trying to get them here. But what the government has to look at is that some of the processes have to be very fast. We have seen in the past businesses going to Vietnam, even small countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, etc., who could start the process very fast, clearances within a week, implementation within a month. So somewhere we have to make things very simple for them to come in here. And the other point I'd like to just build up on what Subir said, localization. This is something where we have to think in terms of how do we help MSMEs get funds because they are the people who would be putting in a lot of these additional, work lines and new products to get in. Sorry for the disruption in the normal routine. I'd request Mr. Vyas, would you like to give some inputs from the industry side? Then we can request Minister Sir to say his view.
Respected Minister, Sir, Honorable Minister, thank you for joining, sir. I had the opportunity to meet you with Mr. Prem Singh from Jodhpur some time ago, and welcome Mr. Pandey also. I had also had the opportunity to meet you many times. Sir, I think industry points are mostly covered by both Mr. Sudhir Chaudhary and Mr. Vikram Sharma. I'd like to we have some suggestions from the infrastructure perspective. I think it has been emphasized that the infrastructure is the key growth driver for our economy, and it has a multiplier impact. So a few of the suggestions which we have, I think first thing, it needs a liquidity in the system. My first request is that there are 3 lakh odd crore is pending to be paid by the either PSUs, governments, and all public sector undertaking, etc. everywhere. So if those payments are at least being put into fast track, that money will come into the system, and that will help the economy to kick up fast. So I think that is not a stimulus, but those are all the payments which are pending from MSME side and other corporates and for providing services, goods, and etc. That's one. Second, sir, on the infrastructure, there are key to challenge. We all know, and there's been a lot of debate in that. So one is the stress which we have seen in the system. Second is the long-term funding. For the long-term, because of the scenario today, what we have short-term and long-term solution. For the short-term solution at the moment, to immediately have a kickoff in the economy and the infrastructure to pick up, I think maybe the decision is required that the retention money of the contractors, which has been there with the principals, if that can be released to the contractors to certain percentage without insisting for the bank guarantee, and that money, whatever is released to the contractors and the construction companies, can be further recovered in installments in next 12 months or 6 months, depending on each principal's own assessment of the risk on those sectors in the construction companies. But that will release a lot of liquidity to all these construction companies to fast track the work, number one. Number two, similarly, there's a 5 lakh odd crore of arbitration awards are pending which have been disputed. I know NHAI has been releasing money against bank guarantee with the Niti Aayog circular. But if we can also start doing it without bank guarantee, because we all know that banks are all risk averse, and our governor of Reserve Bank of India, we heard him last time in the television, where 8 lakh crore rupees in deposited by the banks with the RBI, not lent to the industry. So banks, that indicates the risk averseness of the bank. So if that arbitration money can be released X percentage, may not be 75%, US 25%, without the bank guarantee, that will also help these companies immediately to fast track the work. And third thing is, sir, Mr. Pandey, sir, for request to you is that today the road projects payments are being linked based on the milestones for the EPC work. And because of the migrants of labor issues and the supply chain and the raw material, etc., though the works has started in various sites around 50%, 25 to 50%, depending on the different location, the people will not be able to raise the bill, because even if they perform the work, they will not be able to achieve the milestone due to slow progress of the work. So if you can convert for the next few months, say 3 to 6 months, the payment mechanism from the milestone basis to activity based, that whatever activity has been done, at least that will allow the money inflow in the system for the construction company and the contractor to really start the work. These are very small measures which will benefit us in short term in terms of reviving the infrastructure for the economy. And from long-term perspective, sir, I have two or three specific suggestions. Maybe for the infrastructure, it's a high time we create an infrastructure bank, because banks, no one is able to provide the long-term financing which is required the infrastructure. And we cannot be completely dependent on the government spending for the infrastructure creation in our country. That is not sustainable. Government is doing it, that's a compliment to the government. But I think to have a sustainable infra growth in our country, it's a high time that we also get the money from private sector. And that could be made available by creating a specialized bank for infra financing, where the infrastructure financing, a government guarantee can be provided to a certain extent for funding to the infrastructure, because infrastructure creation is a sovereign risk. The assets are being created in the country itself for the use of the country. So I think that their government can think of providing some guarantee to the lender, which can provide based on the guarantee the long-term financing to the infra industry. by way of either providing a bank through bank or guaranteeing the bond, or by way of direct. Many of the countries we have seen globally, government started buying the bond directly through their central bank and other associations. So maybe government can think of investing directly into the bond. And another sustainable model is maybe a municipal corporation bank for the local level work creation, PWD, etc. So municipal bond guaranteed by the government. So these are the long-term bond, and in these bonds, once it is guaranteed by the government, maybe we'll see the pension fund, insurance fund, etc. to come, who are the long-term investors, to come and invest in these instruments, which will provide the long-term funding to the infrastructure for our country to have a sustainable growth. Last point, sir, I think as Indians, we are compulsive savers. We save, we believe in savings. And even if we have the 5% of, on today, sir, as on date, as per the data, only 5% of our savings are being used for creating financial assets. If we consider, barring this exceptional year, if we consider 7% GDP growth for next 10 years, and we consider 5% savings of Indians channelized into financial assets, more than $10 trillion investment will be available. And if that investment can be channelized through tax-free bonds and other attractive instruments from this infra bank or for the purpose of infrastructure, I think the availability of fund will not be a challenge for funding infrastructure. And last point, sir, we have seen a lot of stress in the infrastructure in the past. So there are a lot of troubled assets in the country in the infrastructure, which is really not allowing the banks and NBFCs to take further exposure in the infrastructure. So the way US has done, created a pool by buying the Troubled Asset Relief Program. They call it TARP, T-A-R-P, Troubled Asset Relief Program. If we can also create something by way of pooling all the stress assets into one particular SPV, and that SPV can actually really rework on creating a viability of, because those projects are stressed because of the lack of viability. So if we can create a packaging of that and make them viable, I'm sure the investors will come and invest in that fund also. So that will not only resolve the troubled assets, make them viable, that will also attract the investment. And there are a lot of investors fund who are willing to invest for the high yield portfolio, and this could be one of them. Last point, sir, from the NBFC perspective, because I'm from Srey Equipment Finance Limited and we are NBFC, and we have been doing financing of construction equipment and infrastructure. I think 2-3 specific points from the financing perspective. It's because, sir, even if today lockdown is lifted, and as Mr. Subir said, that it's not a 6 weeks, maybe it's a 6 quarter or how many period, we don't know. Because the contractors, even if they start the work, getting the money immediately back for them to repay to the banks or NBFC would be challenged. So there's a request to allow one-time restructuring from the Reserve Bank of India and Mr. Mundra. We'd like to have your views also in that if NBFC and all the borrowers are allowed for one-time restructuring of their loans, depending on the expected cash flow, and without disturbing the asset classification, that will be of great help, and that will also save, sir, NPA in the system, and also make a lot of bad money becoming good money. Because if we really make them NPA, everybody gets in, the moment it becomes NPA, everyone gets into recovery mode. Nobody really thinks of solution mode. The moment we make it viable by way of allowing restructuring, etc., it becomes a viable proposition, and that will help to recover the money, and we don't have to put the good money for bad money in the system. That is one part. Second, in terms of, sir, NPA classification, which is 90 days, though a lot of initiatives have been taken by Reserve Bank of India in the last few weeks, but I think it's high time we give more relaxations in NPA in terms of defining number of days so that NPA classification doesn't hurt everybody. And third thing, sir, is that the banks are having liquidity window for them. For NBFC, there is no liquidity window. And in these kind of scenarios, it is a request of the industry that can we create a liquidity window for NBFC, that for any kind of emergency requirement, instead of allowing that NBFC to default and get into trouble, and which impact the entire ecosystem. It is not the impact on one company, it disturbs the whole ecosystem. Can we create a liquidity window for the non-banking finance company, specifically to have them, to work them and support the entire ecosystem there? These are the few very specific suggestions. I'd like to keep it short, though I have a few more, but maybe I want to have very specific to our industry and for the infrastructure industry per se, for your consideration, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vyas. I think we always look forward to having you on the panel because every time you come up with many, many new points from the finance world. And I would come on related to some of these points to Mundra Saab at the last, after both the other gentlemen have finished, because that would be the correct flow. Can I request our Honorable Minister, Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat ji, to let us know, sir, your views about what we've said. And mainly, we are looking at some of our projects continuing, starting up and going faster, but with financing being available. So we are very worried about financing being diverted to other places where it is necessary, but then somehow bring finances back to the projects, as well as what we've talked of liquidity, which is quite a lot with the banks, but they are being, I think, overcautious at this time. And surely for us, both banks and NBFCs are very important, but we are seeing NBFCs suffering quite a bit because of those unequal cash flows, input and output. But I would like to know your ministry's plans also, sir, because you are one of our big prime movers, sir. And the government has put a huge amount of investments into the two main speakers we have, including yourself, sir. So for your ministry, only for irrigation, about $119 billion in next 5 years. And for roads, something like $271 billion in the next 5 years. So for us, these are what we always look at, sir, for continuity of, our industry to grow. Can we have your views, sir?
Thank you, Vikasji. Thank you very much. As we all are aware about that this COVID-19 is going to create a deep and cascading impact on everything. Entire ecosystem is crashed, and it's not all about our country. It's throughout the world. Globally, it has created impacts, and so many things, as I have stated in my opening remarks also, that so many things are going to change permanently. I had an opportunity because I've utilized this time during the evenings because of the lockdown, where I was putting up at my home and not traveling as I used to travel. Otherwise, I used to travel almost like 6 days a week. So I was just going through the reports of post-pandemic time in 1918 and the post Second World War scenario throughout the world. In that time also, the migration pattern of the labor changed for permanently. People have stopped going to far off places for working and for and all type of works. They have stopped. So I am visualizing that similar type of situation is going to arise this time in the country, because I'm dealing directly with the migrant laborers also. And a huge migration is going on from one place to other place. We have just opened up registration in state of Rajasthan, and almost 14 lakhs registrations for the people going out, and 11 lakhs registration for people coming in. They have already been registered. People, and similar number of people have already arrived in the state without registering, and almost half of that they are still waiting for registration. So it is a huge change in the availability of labor also is going to be observed throughout the country, and that is a very, very big challenge which I am looking for the future. As all of you have suggested and stated that there is a big challenge which you all are looking in the future times and the tougher times we are going to see. But as I have said, this is an opportunity, and government is seeing especially our Prime Minister. He says that every day with this the changing scenario and environment, my conviction is become stronger and more stronger that this is an opportunity and we will emerge as a champion. There are two types of wars going on simultaneously. One is the war against COVID, which entire world is fighting, and the other is the war of revival of economy. That is again very important and very critical, and that is going to be more tougher even than fighting with this COVID. So the government is committed, and Honorable Prime Minister says, and the focus of the government will remain in two things. Number one, if I speak about manufacturing sector, then number one, reduction in import, enhancing the exports. Government is going to support these two activities in big. And the second thing is that the infrastructure pipeline, which you all are aware about, the 100 lakh crore pipeline, which we have planned for next 5 years. So we have already started working. We have been instructed by the prime ministers and ministries have been instructed, and they are keeping an eye to immediately.
Yes, I hear some comments from some of the people watching that we can't hear Shekhawatji well. There is a problem with, I think, his connection, and he has gone offline right now. Yeah,
Yeah,
back, sir. Yeah.
I think there was some interruption because I don't know for what reason. But anyway, the 100 lakh crore infrastructure pipeline, which is into prime focus as on date today, and the Prime Minister have created some group of ministers. Informally, they'll have to sit, and among them there is a group on infrastructure, the other is on exports, the third is on rural economy, and the fourth is on skill development, because in the revised scenario and change scenario, skill is going to be a very critical thing, because when the migration pattern is likely to be changed, and the skill development is going to be a very, very critical issue. So a couple of more issues to address, couple of more issues. He has formed some groups, and they have also started working. I would like to say that as far as my ministry is concerned, we are very focused, and we have been assured that there will be no financial constraint as far as the drinking water programs and the AIPP programs are concerned, the irrigation programs are concerned. So, and primarily because the drinking water program, the Jal Jeevan Mission, which Prime Minister have announced last year from the ramparts of Red Fort, where that is a program which is to be completed into mission mode in a time frame, and that's a 50 billion US dollars programs, and I think it is going to be more. So and since drinking water program is going to be up to the last mile in the villages, so that it is going to create more job opportunities as well as the availability of liquidity on the grassroots level. So it is going to help to revive the entire economic process, and we have been instructed clearly to restart our activities as soon as possible. So we are talking with continuously we are talking to the states at ministers level also, and the secretaries level also, to start functioning as soon as possible. Some of the states have already started functioning in the Jal Jeevan Mission in big manner, as state of Bihar and the state of Uttar Pradesh. And some of the states are still struggling because of the local situations, what the COVID situations they are under is their priority. Some of the issues which has been raised by, which are suggestions which have been made by Vyasji, I would request Mr. Vyas to send me a detailed note on infra bank which you have stated about, because there is an infrastructure bank, India Infrastructure Finance Corporation Limited. There is a platform which was created with this mindset only, but I don't know what bottlenecks were there, so it could not serve the purpose which it has been framed for. So how, looking at this opportunity, see, in government also, Prime Minister's clear verdict is that it is the time when we can take crashes, because of the various things, we cannot take those decisions. Now, at this moment, people are also ready, and the entire scenario is also in favor that we can have tough decisions to create the impact and deep impact for revival of the economy. And I would request you, Mr. Chaudhary, that as you have stated about the infrastructure revival and the critical role of the machinery into that. So today also we were discussing to induct the use of machinery into Narega works, so that can also change and give a big support to the construction machinery. It is under discussion that we can allow 15 to 20% of the total Narega works to be done by the machines to support and for the better and quicker results. So that money also, it comes around, if it is 20%, then it comes around 12,000 crore rupees of work through the machine. So it is going to give a big boost. But otherwise also, the government is also thinking in the similar way, which the industry is looking for. So I think the entire ecosystem is on the same page, and we all feel that this is an opportunity for all of us. As you all are aware about the RBI's recent decisions in the cut of CRR and the repo rate, though we have tried very hard and worked very hard, and I think a couple of you must not be very happy with that. The FRBM norms, what we have changed and reduced the FRBM level from 5.8 to brought it to 3.3 level. But what I feel at in present, looking towards the present scenario, we will have to relax that also. So because of that also, liquidity will come, and the government is thinking in the same way which you are thinking. I assure you that we are with you. We will have to work together to revive for the revival of economy. And infrastructure is the key and is the baseline for revival of economy, whereby by reviving or infusing money into infrastructure, we can revive economy in faster manner. So this is what I wish to submit. I think I'll have to make move because it is 4 o'clock and my another meeting has already is blinking on my other system. So I thank all of you, especially Vyasji and Mr. Sharma, for giving me an opportunity to interact with all of you and to understand the need of especially the infrastructure industry, how you people are looking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And we will take some opportunity later as a industry to maybe approach you with some more specific suggestions.
Feel free to send me the whatever suggestions you are after this meeting you have derived or you people have thrown on the platform, so that I can use those during the discussions. I'm just putting up my email ID. My personal email ID on this wall so that you can all note down. And you just please please send me the minutes of this meeting along with the suggestions so I can work in better manner. Yeah?
Sure, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure, sir. Absolutely. Great motivating, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll request for your continuous support to our industry and we'll keep approaching you for your support.
Always there, sir.
So in the meantime, because we are moving quite behind schedule, I would now request Shri R.K. Pandeji from NHAI. He is the person who has absolute knowledge and past experience about road building in India. And sir, as we have said repeatedly in this program and before, we are very dependent on road building. In fact, our industry's growth or slowing down has been very, very directly linked to your programs in the past. And we have seen NHAI to be the most proactive as well as very, very supportive department, sir. But again, the issues that we have raised to the minister are very valid for you to address, sir. So a few specific things in addition to, hearing about your plans of your ministry for the next, I would say 1 year and 2 year, which is more relevant, is that are you going to be thinking of redrafting your plans in view of the current situation, or is it something too early to state that? The other issue that we all worry about is that the programs which have been going on and the way they have been funded in the past, is it going to be again another thing that you may have a different way of thinking and taking care of these funding programs? Because we followed quite a bit of the EPC model. We tried the PPP in the past, which didn't succeed too much. But is this the time to look at bringing in the PPP model with a lot of changes or some other changes, because EPC has its own, issues for the contractors? And Lastly, we would also like to have your views about are we looking at some kind of a cash crunch because also of the uh, going down of the usage of petrol, diesel, etc., and the cess collection would have also affected, the inflow of funds for these projects. So without taking more time, sir, I'd like to uh, have your views for all of us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sharma sir. As all you know that we are passing through a rough patch. This was an we never expected, we never planned, but it's also a fact that we are fighting on two fronts. One is stay safe, and another is revival of the economy. And when we talk about revival of the economy for a country like ours, which is a developing country, infrastructure really holds the key. And when I talk about the infrastructure, particularly in the Indian condition, roads have the predominant role for a very simple reason, because it is the most preferred mode of travel in India. So there's no doubt in it, roads, they are contributing a lot for development of the infrastructure. Before I go to the question you have raised, let us talk about the plan. As all you know, 2 years back, we have launched an ambitious program of Bharatmala, which in fact envisages development of around 25,000 kilometers of the national highway and another 5,000 under NHEP. So ultimately, we were supposed to develop 30,000 kilometers of national highway in a span of 5 years. So far, we have already awarded around 12,000 kilometers at a cost of 3,10,000 crore. Our pipeline, it covers total work size of around 15 lakhs crore. And it also forms one of the component of the NIP. Coming back to the question whether the COVID has affected us, of course it has affected us. Last year, we planned to award around 4,500 kilometers, but we could award only 3,200 kilometers for a very simple reason. Last 15 days, we could not even open the bids. And whenever there the places where we were supposed to open bid, we received number of requests from the bidders that we are not in a position to either submit or in a position to attend the opening of the bid. So we'll have to defer all those. To overcome all this, we have brought out number of policy change, and now even we are not asking for the original document, and although these are the temporary phase, which we feel that we can handle very easily. This year again, we have a plan of award of 4,500 kilometers, and I am optimistic if everything is, I'm not saying exactly normal, but if things improve by the end of September also, we will be in a position to handle the task before us. One issue always raised is about the stress project. We have analyzed, yes, we have burnt our fingers, we have gone back through the whole piece of work which became stressed. We have seen what are the reason for stress of a project. One of the fundamental flaw from our side, which we have seen, that we have awarded the work presuming that the land acquisition and the financial closure will go together, and by the time I'll acquire the land, financial closures will be achieved. That really did not materialize. So to avoid any stressing a project in future, before 2 years, roughly when we launched Bharatmala, we have decided we'll not award a work until and unless we'll have 90% of the land in our possession. It will ensure, at least from NHAI side, there is no issue of liquidity. Number of suggestions were made. I can only tell you what we did during last 2 years. There were a stress project. We have taken over a number of projects. Take the case of ILFS project. We have valued the whatever work has been done, we paid and take over. The other kind of infusion of fund in the form of liquidity is, everybody talked about disputed amount in arbitration. I can tell you the NHI is one organization which has introduced a very, very transparent, open system of dispute resolution. We have 3 different resolution committee, conciliation committee. These are the independent committee. They are not from NHAI side committee. One committee is headed by Mr. Pradeep Kumar, who was former CBC. One committee is headed by Mr. Vijay Chibbar, former Secretary to Government of India. One committee is headed by Justice Basist. Any contractor can approach them, and then they'll give maximum 6 hearings. And within 6 hearings, things will be resolved. You know, when I talk to you in this language, many times people ask me whether it is really working. I can only tell you 86 cases were referred to them. They have resolved 46 cases. The amount of dispute involved in these cases was of the order of 12,000 crore, and it has been settled in 3,600 crore. So these committees are working very well. Coming back to the question of liquidity in terms of payment, contract agreement not acceptable, but here, keeping in view the condition which, can you hear me?
Sir, there is a disruption just in the last 1 minute or so. If you can repeat the last point again, sir.
Last point, the one part liquidity, improving the liquidity situation by dispute resolution. Number 2 is by making payment for the ongoing works. Even before COVID, when the industry represented to us that they are finding it difficult to achieve the milestone, we relaxed those conditions. We relaxed, of course, on the basis of payment of interest during that period. But in the COVID period, we are further thinking of relaxing all these conditions. It is under consideration. Then a concern was raised about financing of road project and whether it will get priority or not, on what will happen after COVID. There's no doubt in it. COVID situation is one thing which is the first enemy which we'll have to fight, and it will certainly get priority. But as you heard Mr. Shekhabat, he said, infrastructure will also not be ignored, because the second war is revival of the economy. So I'm sure the road sector will also not be ignored. Even coming to a point that, let us think that there has been some cut in the infrastructure sector, particularly the road sector. We have the intrinsic strength that we generate our revenue after construction of road, we'll get the toll. So we have some kind of flexibility. Even people said about this reduction in cess. Of course, when there was no vehicle on the road, cess will be less. But see the percentage of cess in my total allocation. Out of 1,30,000 crore, cess is only 22,000 crore. Number 2, the kind of flexibility the road sector has. Better if I'll, rather than explaining in terms of word, I will give you the example. When we started GQ, we started with an objective that the entire project will be funded through the government support and will take up 15% through the BOT. When this NHDP 1 and 2 means GQ and North, South, East, West corridor were further expanded, and we gone up to NHDP 7, the whole project, whole program was supposed to be funded by BOT. Only 15% are supposed to be funded by the budgetary support. In the year 11-12, when BOT flopped, again to revive the sector, we went to the fully supported, fully funded by the government, and the EPC mode was introduced. Knowing fully well that EPC cannot be a solution for long term, we introduced another mode, hybrid annuity mode. Then, when realizing that there is a segment who is not willing to take the construction risks, who is only willing to take revenue risk, we have introduced TOT model. So road sector has the strength which can, respond to the challenges by way of different mode. Even NHAI has got the approval for its own InvIT. NHAI will take up some of the project through SPV.
Oh.
Then, there are a number of ways of getting finance. So I am confident that our program is not going to be affected by all these challenges. We'll try to accommodate within the given room, and we will be in a position to handle the situation. Coming to the, yes, of course, I don't know what will be the definition of the normal condition. Even in China, if you see in China and America, it is too early to say what will be the normal. But as everybody was talking about, that it gives us an opportunity. It's a challenge which can be converted into an opportunity. My point to the construction industry and particularly from the equipment manufacturer, why don't you take it as an opportunity? Try to replace all those specifications which are labor oriented. Convert it into mechanized construction. It will solve the problem of the sector. We'll have faster construction, we'll have better construction, and we'll need not to handle all these labor issues for big projects. Similarly, there are other issues as well. Say, for example, today I'm engaging many people in quality control for supervision. Why the industry can't respond to me that whatever is fed in, it is automatically converted into quality checks? To explain my point of view, say, for example, a concrete batching mix plant, which is giving me a concrete, can tell us what is the water content, what was the cement, how much was the aggregate. I can eliminate the whole supervision team from there. So it is an opportunity, certainly. Again, if we have to speed up today, if I'm constructing 30 kilometers and I'll have to construct 40 kilometers a day, what I need is more speed, and this kind of challenges. Now I'm looking for those equipment which are capable of compacting more. Say today limit is 250. Can't we have those kind of equipment which can give me 400 or 500? So instead of laying one layer, I can lay 2 layers. As far as NHAI is concerned, we are open, we are confident that we are in a position to handle the assignment given to us. We will be on time. Yes, of course, this kind of challenges which affect us, we'll have to take care of them. We cannot ignore them, but at the same time, we are there, we'll help you in each and every aspect, but at the same time, we'll expect industry to come forward and help us as well to achieve our targets. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Thank you very much, Pandey Saab. It's very heartening to hear from the Minister Saab and from you that even in this difficult time, infrastructure will not lose its priority. And coming from the government directly, it's very heartening for us as an industry. We look forward to taking your points very much into account. And one thing I can say, sir, that in terms of mechanization, we have been working a lot on it. And as one of the points I wanted to respond to the Minister, sir, we are putting a lot of effort through our association into skilling. And skilling is something which is also going to help a lot in terms of improving the project's speed, operation, accuracy, and viability. So thank you very much, sir. Both of you have given us a lot of hope to take with us. And now I would slightly change the route to request Mr. Vyas to put the questions to Mundra, sir, because let's be some specific points that you would like him to clarify on what has been discussed now. And from my side, yes, I would then join in. But basically, I would introduce Mr. S.S. Mundra, who's been the Deputy Governor in RBI and one of the persons who's been very, very respected in his field. And sir, we would certainly be looking for guidance from you for long-term funding of infra projects and the instruments that could be developed for long-term funding, slightly different to what we do today. And 2 points for a newer consideration. One is that how do you see future of leasing? Because India is very much lagging behind in terms of leasing of equipments, etc., while the whole world moves on leasing in a big way. And another is how do you see the financial services now evolving from here on? So Vyas Saab, if you would like to add some piece from your side or a question to Mundra Saab, then we could have suggestions from him in
Yes,
totality.
Yes, sir. Before that, thank you, Mr. Pandey. I think few of the point which you made, self quality certification, etc., is very good input for the industry which you have highlighted. I think, but one or two suggestions which we have from the industry side, we request you to consider is that retention money, etc., and giving, this payment methodology change for the contractors to have them liquidity for the short term, very short term. And this is in this scenario where they are not being able to get the money from banks or NBFC, your support. And I agree with you that NHA has always come on the front and supported the contractor for non-viable project converting to viable and the gap funding, etc. You have been doing in the past. So this is a time we again come to you as an industry for the support. So this is a request we leave for your consideration, sir.
Sure, we'll do that.
Yeah, and Mundra Saab, thank you very much for taking time in joining our request. Thanks a lot, sir. NBFCs, I'm from Say Equipment Finance, and we are NBFC, and we all the NBFCs. I mean, thank you, Reserve Bank. I think they've really taken the initiative and had a meeting with the bank for convincing them to allow moratorium to NBFCs also. But I think by the time the moratorium is allowed, the moratorium period is getting over. 31st May. The moratorium is only till 31st May. And while we are discussing, I'm reading on the chat, many people are requesting that please raise this point on our behalf that the moratorium period from 3 months should be increased to another 3 months. But I think that's a very short-term pills. It may not be sufficient whether 3 months or 6 months. It's important that we allow restructuring one time, sir. So we'd like to have your view on 2-3 points from the NBFC perspective for one-time restructuring. And again, I repeat, the liquidity window for the NBFC. For approaching, for getting the liquidity, because I can tell you with full, confidence that the banks are really risk averse in terms of lending money to NBFCs. Even the TLTRO, which we heard the auction, which we saw, actually there was not much takers, and the banks had created a policy that the investment from the TLTRO will be only in the AA, AAA rated instrument, which is very hard to find today with continuous downgrading of most of the NBFCs from the rating agency in this kind of COVID-19 and pre-COVID-19 scenario which we have seen. So that is another point. Third point is, again, it's a little out of box thinking, but is there, today we have a tier 1 and tier 2 capital for capital adequacy ratio, and there's a limit that 50% of tier 1 only can be tier 2, which is 5, but maximum is 5%. So is there a right time now for short term to allow the gap to increase the way RBI has rightly taken the decision to allow the gap to increase between repo and reverse repo, which was always, not much of gap, and they allowed the gap to widen. Is there a time now to allow tier 1, tier 2 gap to increase, where tier 2 can be, because very difficult to find equity today in this market, sir. Globally, getting equity in NBFC sector in this environment is difficult. But maybe you will the NBFC industry can be able to attract the bonds tier 2 capital. And tier 2, if there's a restriction of 5%, maybe this will, limit the opportunity. Is there a time now to allow this this percentage to increase for some time? So I'll leave it to you with these thoughts, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vyas, and thanks the entire Intermat for organizing this very relevant and webinar, which is all the issues which the industry is facing at this point of time. I think there is a huge canvas, a lot has been covered, and what have you asked is also quite a few things. But I would just like to start with some broad thought on this, that, at what point of curve we are at this point of time in this pandemic is still really not known. So we don't know how long and how big it is going to be. So first thing, to my mind, while this is a good time to start doing a planning, but I'm not convinced that you can put a final plan at this point of time because you don't know the dimension. So it's good to discuss, think about the possibilities, do the planning. But to my mind, we are still a little distance away from putting a final plan. That's the point one. I am observing, as I was just in another webinar before this, practically every segment of the economy is putting a demand on government. And it's quite clear it will not be possible for the government to really meet demand of every segment. Even if they meet the demand, looking to the condition today, I think a fundamental question before government would be whether the support is to be given which spurs the consumption immediately or investment. To my mind, probably it will be a mix of both. even if it is something to spur the investment, where should it go? To the mega projects needing the high technology or high equipment, or to the projects which are more labor intensive? Because mega projects would translate into the supporting the economy, but with a lag. Labor incentive would give a immediate relief. So I think these are the some few fundamental questions which government must surely be grappling with. But the point I'm trying to make here, that ultimately is not the government which can meet all the requirement, and we will be needing again a PPP kind of thing in whatever shape, and also the international capital. Now, it will be educative to see that the PPP model which was introduced, and after, of course, it was already mentioned, some of the point Mr. Pandey also mentioned. To my mind, there were 4 or 5 problems. Number one, these were the long gestation projects, but there were no agency to finance them, and banks took that mantle. And because of their own ALM issue, they tried to finance the long-term project in a shorter loan duration, and which the developers and borrowers also happily created it, being very optimistic that ultimately everything would fall in place. That was the one problem which happened. Then, of course, the problem of delays and the obtaining the various clearances. There was also another problem of practically, I should not say so, but having remained a banker, I have seen many of the projects practically had no equity. There were only debt, driven projects, and because they didn't have any resilience in case of any adversity in projection. So that was the another thing. And then the disputes, arbitration, Mr. Pandey was also meaning sanctity of contract. So these were all the problems around PPP. And if we are again trying of bringing this model, these are issues would need to be fixed up. There are added problems now. And added problems is, when I look into the infra space, and if we are talking about PPP, I think there were handful of people, handful of the groups who were really executing the large part of these projects. And if I talk in cricket parlance, most of them are retired hurt today for one reason or other reason.
Well said, sir.
Now there is a gap. Whether this gap can be fulfilled immediately, that's the thing. Second, now labor migration, we have already discussed. Labor migration has happened, and maybe as Minister was mentioning, this may be for a more longer cultural pattern rather than a short-term problem. Now, third is, because of these delays and everything, the project period is going to be even further delayed. Means the whole cash flow, whole calculation, whole loan period need to be relooked into. So I think, these are several kind of things which, for the short term, to my mind, it will be more countryside, labor intensive projects like which can be now need of the rural irrigation, ponds, roads, healthcare, sanitation. Those are the kind of projects which there will be inclination to support them, both from the viewpoint of livelihood and the labor engagement. Now, whether they would fit into a commercial model, how that is to be done. I think these are the few fundamental issues which industry will need to discuss right now. But coming to your specific issues, number one, if we are, and I am conscious of the time which we have overrun, so I will try to be very short. I think if we are again thinking that the financing can come from the bank only, so ALM issues have not gone away, the bank's liability profile has not changed. So I think if we are thinking that what failed last time would succeed this time, that is a wishful thinking. Globally, if I understand, there had been this kind of projects are being financed by the pension fund and insurance companies. And I think that is, those are one institution which we need to bring into the game. But obviously there will be risk aversion, there will be regulatory issues. So probably a via media could be that there is a long-term infra fund kind of thing, support fund kind of thing, which provides a backstop guarantee. It may not 100% guarantee the exposure being taken, but a first loss to certain degree and all that. So I think the financing by insurance, pension fund, and long-term players, supported by this kind of infra development bank with a partial or backstop guarantee, and the instruments which have this long-term instrument which have this kind of optionality embedded, so that they get a better rating as well as better rate. I think that is one possibility which needs to be looked into. Similarly, if we are talking about the innovative instruments, probably we also have to think about the instruments which have the hybrid in nature, which have the nature of debt as well as equity. Maybe there could be instrument which is giving a certain percentage of assured return, but also opening the possibility of profit sharing by way of a higher coupon. So those kind of innovation would also need to be looked into. Preference share is another instrument which needs to be looked into with criticality. So shortly, I am able to say in long term, this is the most possible structure which comes to my mind. Coming to your question around, lease, you are mute. You are mute. Mr.
No,
Vyas,
sir, no, sir, please continue. I'll ask one more point in the last.
you
Please
are
continue.
on mute. So yeah, I'll continue. On leasing, somehow, yes, I agree that it has never taken off in India. But I think there are few reasons. Number one, I think secondary market for redeployment of assets is very limited as far as India is concerned. Then banks don't have expertise in this area, and they don't know what will be the what will be the use of repurchased assets, and also assessment of remaining value, so that accordingly they can determine the rate. All those things are missing. Then spread between lease rental and EMI, if it is a bought out asset, are prohibitive from the viewpoint of borrower, and hence it is not attractive. That is another factor. Other thing I found that upfront margin which is demanded in Indian context is around 20%, whereas in developed market it could be even 5 and 10%. So I think that is also another area. Then tax efficiency comes into play, because from the viewpoint of borrower, which will be a more tax efficient model, that also becomes relevant. My sense is, you yourself are an example, Mr. Vyas. I think it would be too optimistic to believe that any day soon the mindset of banks would change and they would become the fan of lease financing. I don't see that possibility happening, but surely I see the possibility that in the non-banking space, there is room for the specialized institutions, because at this moment, very few of you who are operating. That could be a greater possibility. So I think this is what. Anything else which I have left out?
Sir,
You're mute.
yes, sir. NBFC can play a bigger role in leasing, because I think leasing is the best way to create the capital asset in the country, which will really, kickstart the economy, or which will sustain the economic growth. And the NBFC access to the fund is a challenge today. So from the banks, as you all know, there's a risk aversion from the bank side to provide liquidity to NBFC. Maybe we were expecting some support from the central bank or the government. So the government has come with a scheme of PCG, for guaranteeing the assignment. but that was limited only for the retail SME customers. So I think, these kind of initiatives which can be expanded to all the kind of loan or creating a liquidity window for NBFC, then this can be used for lease equipment and the capital creation in the country would be very useful, sir.
See, there are four. Thank you. Yeah, that was your question. There are four things. Number one, from the very beginning, I found it very strange that why RBI was so rigid about not extending the moratorium to NBFC while extending it to their ultimate borrowers. And to my mind, that was a trigger of creating so many other problems in the Indian financial market. Anyway, they have started discussing now. As you were mentioning that we are at the end of the moratorium period and what will be used. So let's hope that there will be further extension of moratorium and that time it can come handy. So let us not be, worried about that. But that is one point. So the second is, see, we are confusing liquidity with the credit. The problem at this point of time is the problem of credibility. And to be very frank, NBFCs have also not covered themselves in glory in last some time. We should also understand that the regulatory regime for NBFC is continuously changing. It's a harmonization. I don't say it is getting equalized with the banking regulation, but they are being harmonized. It means there will be more and more disclosure requirement and more stringent recognition requirement. So that will, certainly show the health of NBFC in a different context. Third thing is accounting standard. Now, NBFCs have already moved to Ind AS. So that will also have an impact on your disclosure. So that being the case, to my mind, 2-3 things at this point of time are important and imperative. Number one, lockdown itself is going up to May, so moratorium period certainly needs to be extended. How much? That can always be, it will be evolving situation. Number two, the lifting of moratorium is not going to be like a magical wand or a sudden event that till today everything is locked down and tomorrow everything is opened up. That's not going to happen. It will be a gradual opening. And if it is a gradual opening, then normalcy being restored can take quite some time, gradual. So I have mentioned it also earlier on a couple of other public platforms that it will be very, very important to consider one-time restructuring without any, stigma being attached. And not only this restructuring, even if it is having a ballooning kind of repayment period, which alters the structure of original repayment, which was equal, because going by the things as it is happening, I think it will be a more ballooning scenario rather than. So that is the second thing which needs to be permitted. And third, the government backstop support. I was talking in terms of long-term instrument and all that, but even for the existing, a backstop, first loss absorption, 10%, 15%, whatever it is. But that is very, very much needed and quite possible that it may not be put to any use or it may be used to a very less extent. But the message which it gives and confidence which it builds changes the whole thing. Because if any of you recollect post 2008, government announced a similar liquidity window for mutual funds, which was never put to use, but that changed the whole dynamics in the market. So I think these are the few things we need to do.
Thank you very much, sir. Very, 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 very detailed and a lot of new points in it. Surely we are going to collect these and work on many of these with the help of Mr. Vyas. I'd like to quickly now move to a slightly different field. And Isabel is with us, Isabel Ilfano. She's the director of Comexposium France. And sir, that this webinar is also hosted by Intermat France, and Intermat India is going to be starting soon in India. So I'll request her, Isabel, please take this time to tell us a little about situation in France. You've heard all the discussions about priorities in India and the danger of funds moving somewhere else, etc., or not being there, or being there still. And secondly, how do you see expositions in the near future of, let's say, 1 year window? Do you think they could be practically held, barring that there'll be restrictions and there'll be hesitation to travel, etc.? Your views on these points, please.
Okay, yeah, thank you. First of all, good afternoon to all. I'm very honored to be part of this prestigious and very enthusiastic panel today, organized in the frame of Intermat India, as you mentioned. Intermat India is indeed the new construction show, which first edition will take place in Mumbai in March next year. And Intermat India is designed from Intermat Paris, one of the leading construction shows in the world, organized every 3 years in Paris. So I'm speaking to you now live from Paris, and I will now give you a quick overview on how France is tackling in the construction industry. First of all, as in India, most of the construction sites in France have stopped during lockdown, which started 2 months ago. Therefore, the construction industry in France is one of the sectors most affected by partial activity. With 13% of the request, construction ranks actually third in the sector most affected by partial activity. This extent of the use of partial activity in the construction industry can be surprising. It is as important as in accommodation or catering, a sector which is closed administratively. It means that 6 out of 10 employees currently on partial employment work in a company with less than 50 employees. In the construction industry, almost all types of companies use it, including large groups such as Vinci or Bouygues. And this is explained by the practice of subcontracting. On large sites, there are many small businesses. So as of now, there are 1.1 million employees from 122,000 part-time public works companies, which means the state pays the pay of 82% of employees in the sector. I just would like to remind that the French government put in place a specific partial activity scheme. And in this scheme, the allocation from the government covers 84% of net salaries for employees in partial activity. So there is a support from the government for companies across all industries to implement partial activity. If this support lasts 3 months or at least, the cost will amount to 6.4 billion euros just for construction. So it's a huge support. The government provides massive support to construction companies and employees to avoid failures and layoffs, and of course retain skills. So as I mentioned earlier, the activity of construction is very low, between 15 and 20% of the usual level, against 80 to 85% in Germany, where the work site has not necessarily stopped. Certainly part of the sites can wait, but a lasting drop in activity will end up weighing heavily, because when a sector comes to complete stop, halt, recovery is more difficult than if it only slows down. So the country, France, must therefore try to revive a certain activity now, while guaranteeing the safety of the employee in this sector, which irrigates, as you said, all the economy life and the territory. So it's very important for the construction sites to start again. But of course, one of the non-negotiable conditions for taking over construction site is obviously to ensure health and employee safety. The leading association of the sector published a guide to help contractors and other stakeholders. The building and public works have a solid culture of prevention through, and a guide has been drawn by the profession and validated by the states. This manual must now secure employers and employees, and the time has come to steady the reopening of construction sites while protecting the health of workers. This guide actually adapts the usual barrier gestures to the COVID-19 context. Putting in place these preventive measures increase the cost of construction sites, obviously. A practice which leads, for example, to split teams actually lead to a decrease in productivity. But this is a question that is found in other sectors, from industry to small food trade. The economy activity is heavily impacted, it is obvious, but to stop it completely, it is even worse. So to get out of this economic crisis, we need construction sites, even with degraded profitability levels, to start again. But getting into the world of before is unfortunately not getting into the world of before is unfortunately not one of the possible choices, and it will take time for the construction site to go back as normal. But it's essential to revive the construction site to revive the economy. So this is how the situation is at the moment in France regarding construction. The sites are, the lockdown is officially over on Monday, and the work sites are gradually recovering, but it will take time to go back to normal. You also ask about the exhibition. I will mainly talk about Intermat. No, I mean, the current circumstances affect, the sector, but the time has come to look forward positively to the post-crisis period. And for Intermat Paris, we are grateful for the support of our partners and all those who are already committed to the success of the show. And we strongly believe that Intermat 2021, held a long time after this troubled period, will by bringing together all the stakeholders in our ecosystem, will facilitate the return to a construction market with renewed positive prospects. While the reign of e-life will perhaps accelerate during the lockdown everywhere in the world, the desire to be together and for social contact will also become apparent to the professions and companies in the sector. So I'm very optimistic about the construction show and the shows in general, and we have a very, very good feedback from the ecosystem and from the stakeholders for Intermat Paris. And in this framework, we are very also optimistic about the launch of Intermat India in Mumbai next year. And I think this gathering will be a good opportunity for the construction industry, made of very enthusiastic people, as I saw this morning, to get back together and build the world of tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Isabel. That was very detailed. Good to hear your confidence on travel and expositions.
Yeah.
And to round up the whole thing, this wonderful session, I'll invite Mr. Rajan Sharma, MD of Intermat India and also Interacts, to please give your feel about how expositions in India are looking like in the near future, and how do you see Intermat India taking place. And thereafter, you can round off and close this session, because we'll have to take a little pardon from those who have raised certain questions. We do not have time now, and we'll take those questions to the panelists and get their answers and send you back the replies. I think that is what we'll do. So over to Mr. Rajan Sharma.
Thank you, sir. First and foremost, I'm very, very grateful to all the panelists with the kind of interaction which has gone, which is very, very positive, and specifically coming from the government, that a positive sign from the infrastructure. So that's very, very well. Coming down to exhibitions, sir. Well, there are challenges and opportunities. The Indian exhibition industry, definitely, we have all come down together at this time of the situation that we're going through. Because we must understand that success of an exhibition is always footfalls. We say how many footfalls have come. And right now, the whole song is all about social distancing. So you have on one side you have the footfalls, and one side you have social distancing. Uh, so in this time, we all have come down together. There are being various SOPs being coming into action. And I must inform that during this part of time, we as organizers in India realized that we need to have an association of only organizers. And within a short span of, I think, about less than 45 days, there is a work in place of getting this association in place. And there is an interest of more than 100 big time, small time, medium size organizers who have come down together. So the whole idea is to make sure that the exhibition, which is the touch and feel factor, which cannot be replaced by any other medium. So the exhibitions are going to stay here, and we have everybody is putting their bit together to make sure that the exhibitions keep up with the safety standards, with the hygiene factors. We have the government initiative in the form of ITPO in Delhi, which is coming up as a state-of-the-art venue. And we also we had a webinar with Mr. Agrawal, the executive director, and we requested him to have a demo show in ITPO just to get the confidence back of the participants, both from the exhibitors and attendees perspective, which he very kindly agreed to. And now we also have the intent is, there is a very strong exhibition center coming up next to the airport in Dwarka, which is being managed by a very professional group from South Korea. In fact, the South Koreans are opening up an exhibition just next week. So that will also give us a pretty much an insight as to how exhibitions will be handled in future. Like Mr. Chowdhury said, that there is going to be a new norm. There is going to be something will be a new norm will happen. And we are going to make sure that we follow the hygiene, the safety standards. But the exhibition industry per se in India is definitely going to be a boom time because lots of industries, lots of countries would want to come down to India as the other alternative in Asia, which is already starting off. I can speak for myself. I have already been in this time of period. I'm in talks with 2 different international partners to bring in shows to India. So that is the kind of thing we're looking at. But of course, we need, like any other sector, we need a hand holding by the government. That's why the exhibition organizer association is being formed. But the SOPs have been in place, both from the venue side of it, both from the exhibition organizer part of it. And by the time Intermat India takes place, which is in March, I'm sure lots of exhibitions will be taking place around the world. And we will have a lot of takeaways from those exhibitions as to what should be done. Just last week, next to Wuhan, there was an exhibition in China on automobiles where 62,000 people visited the event, which was a 42,000 meter event. So exhibition is something which will never die, because the touch and feel, the factor that you have to have a face-to-face interaction with the buyer and seller. Like even we are doing this webinar, end of the day, we have to meet. So that is something which will happen. Of course, there will be safety standards. There will be so many things coming up. And one of the things that we have recommended as an association of organization, we are going to recommend to ITPO is give us, instead of 3 days, make it a 5-day show. So what we can do is we can have visitors come in small batches. So keep the flow going. So, keep in such a fashion that there is no loss of business for the exhibitors and the attendees. And I'm sure by the time things will improve and we will take it from there. But the exhibitions will definitely be on an upswing in India for sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma. And with that, I think we wind up today's pretty elongated discussion, but a wonderful discussion, I must say. And thanks to all the panelists for bringing out so many dimensions and so many views, which three of us will carry back to our forum in construction equipment industry. And also to you, Mr. Sharma, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. Before I end, sir, I just wanted to thank the industry that we have postponed the show from October, which was there, to March. And I want to use this platform to show my gratitude and say that none of the exhibitors have pulled back. In fact, as of today, which should be a very positive sign for the construction industry, that our show in Mumbai is 80% sold out. So during these times when people say construction is going through, a negative side or there is a show called Intermat which is doing very well. So we tell the whole world 80% of the show sold out in the first time. And I just wanted to show that is also a very positive side of looking at the thing.
Thank you. Me being a marketing person also, I appreciate such sales opportunities not being missed. So with that, I think now we thank all the panelists, and right now we have Mr. Vyas with us and Mr. Chaudhary, Isabel and Rajan. And thanks a lot for the show. Vyasji, we'll have to somewhere make the minutes quickly and forward to the minister as he suggested. So would be in touch with you separately on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.